بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين. Dear brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The sacrifice of Imam Hussain alayhi salam is now commemorated on a yearly basis. And within the Western countries, it's something that came later on compared to the Middle Eastern countries where it was known as something as part of the people's culture. These days, it's not just the Western countries where you see people commemorating Imam Hussain and the incident of Karbala. One now can even go to Japan and they'll see that there's a Hussainiyya in Japan and a sheikh there, a mu'ammam, who is Japanese. And I think the community is a mix of Pakistanis and Afghans, but they commemorate the message of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. And the important thing about this message is that it does not change. It was there to be preserved and preserve the original message of Islam. But one thing that we find is that society these days is constantly changing in where we live. New things will come up where we've never heard of these ourselves, or some of us were not born in that time. Let's say in the 60s, 70s, 80s, certain concepts came up which we never heard of. And these same concepts are being taught to our kids in schools in this country, and they're trying to, let's say, maybe brainwash some of them and say, oh, these things are normal. We have some hadith from the Imams. Obviously, all of you know bid'ah. Bid'ah is an innovation in the religion. There's also bid'ah when it comes to sins. Let me give you an example. Before, if someone wanted to gamble, where does he have to go? He has to go to, let's say, a casino. He has to go out of his house, make an effort. But these days, what can someone do? He can wake up in the morning, put on his phone, and start gambling on his phone. If someone wanted to look at a woman in a bad way, what does he have to do? He has to go outside his house. He has to spy on some women, like some of the bad Sahaba did, as we know in history. They would do this, or spy on some of the Prophet's wives. Or he'd make an effort, basically, to do that. These days, what does he do? He picks up his phone. He goes on a website showing, let's say, illicit types of pictures. He goes in the street, he sees an ad in the middle of the street, woman dressed inappropriately, or he just sees this basically. So what we find is bid'ah also comes in the form of sins. And the Imams alayhim as-salam warned us about this because everyone was talking about Corona. Why did Corona happen? Why are we getting new diseases? There were different theories about this. But the more sins come and the more new ways and new types of sins come, the more types of afflictions will happen. So this is probably one of the biggest problems we have now, is that these things which were never acceptable, they've started to eventually become acceptable. And you'll find people on the TV saying that there's 100 different genders, for example. So obviously in all of our time we knew man, woman, and in very rare cases khunfa, as they say in Arabic, like let's say someone who is born as a hermaphrodite. But what is it, male or female? You have a passport, you travel somewhere, are you a male or female? Now they're saying that no, you can be 100 different genders. And even the people who are transgender, they started saying that we're getting angry about this because now you're making it harder for us. We just said we want to be a man or woman. Now you're saying there's 100 different genders. But gradually, these things in society, people are trying to make them widely acceptable. And what's the reason for this? Is because people do not have hidayah. They do not have divine guidance. When you base what's bad and good on your desires, your shahawat, of course it's going to be changing. For example, I spoke to one atheist, English guy, where he said that he's an atheist. I said, where do you take your morals from? Oh, I take it from my parents. I said, what, just from your parents, ultimate morality? So yeah, the parents teach us what is bad and good. So what about some Daesh parents in ISIS? They taught their kids to behead people, or they taught their kids to enslave and rape people. That means in that case, we cannot take ultimate morality, what? From parents. Because parents can be wrong. Obviously, some parents, good parents, try to raise their kids, but in some cases they can be wrong. He then said the society. They said, well, you can't take it from society. Certain practices or relationships, as we know, they were even outlawed in England. They were something taboo. Now, they've become so normal that apparently 15,000 of our tax money, or I believe more than that actually, 50,000, were decorating fire engines with this certain type of promotion for relationships between certain types of people, if you get what I mean. So now, if you're basing your morality on what is good or bad on society, then it's always going to change. And then 50 years later, something that you never thought could be fine would become fine in the society. Now, this is because we have fixed guidance, that in Islam we have principles and we have laws for everything. Some people say, though, not all the things existed in the times of the Imams alayhim assalam. There was not, for example, let's say cocaine or heroin or these new types of drugs. But the Imams alayhim assalam, they give us a principle. They'll say anything that is like a khamr, it intoxicates your mind, is haram. Or for example, something that we don't know existed in the time of the Imams, we have al-bara'a, not the disassociation in terms of enemies of Ahlul Bayt, but the rule where everything is halal for you unless you know it's haram. So if something comes and we don't know there's any prohibition on it, then we can say it's halal. Not, for example, like some Wahhabis where they say everything is haram, basically every single thing is bid'ah. So due to the society changing and these new types of ways and sins, one needs a path for themselves to follow and one needs a type of guidance. And this is why Imam Hussain alayhi salam, he preserved Islam for us. But after that, it's not just, we know what the false Islam is, we know that there was Shia al-Amir al-Mu'mineen, but it's about facing the challenges of society and how that influences us and our offspring and our children in the society. For example, some without the divine guidance, they will start attacking Muslims, saying you guys are backwards, you guys follow the Stone Age, you know, you don't give rights to women, you know, you're following something from thousands of years ago. And a common example, as I said, it comes down to women, that we do not give women rights. And sometimes it's the fault of those who claim to be Muslims that they give this bad image. For example, we have one Afghani brother in the audience, he'll know, and all of us know, that the Taliban, they recently took over Afghanistan. So there's a lot of speak about, are they going to give women rights? Are they going to let women study? Because there's no prohibition in Islam to allow women to get education. If women do not work and have education, then when your wife needs to, or sister needs to see a female doctor, there's no female doctor, there's no nurse. So how can we say they cannot have education? Islam does not prohibit women working as long as the hijab is preserved. Yes, there's certain types of jobs even in this country it might not be appropriate for a woman because there might be, let's say, some fasad there, or even for men. So there might not be certain types of jobs. Let's say someone wants to be work at a swimming pool or something like that as a man, even it's not going to be appropriate for him. So there'll be certain types of jobs which are not appropriate for men or women. But I watched a recent documentary from Vice, which is independent media, and one of the presenters, she spoke to the Taliban in a court. So this woman, she had broken bones, scans of it, and they did something between the husband to say, okay, what happened? So he made a qasam that he never hit her, and they said, okay, end of story now, we believed him. And she said, okay, she said, what happens to those women that they get abused? And the Taliban member told her what? He said, there's no abuse against women, and it's all accusations. You see? So when non-Muslims see this, they say that, okay, these are the Emirat Islami, these are the people who are claiming Islam. They are saying they are talib, tullab, people who have studied the religion, and they're saying that there's no abuse that comes to women. So what I want to speak about in this lecture is a few different things in regard to women. Firstly, what's the types of rights women have in Islam? Do they have rights? Are they equal to men? Because you know we get this thing that women and men should be equal in everything. Women and men are the same. But if you put a woman in a boxing ring with a man, all of a sudden are they going to be the same there? You know, there are genetic proof and scientific proof that there are differences between men and women. So what does Islam say about this? Is it about fairness or is it about being equality and equal in everything? Another thing is about the Qur'anic status of women. What does the Qur'an say in regard to the believers, the male and the female believers, and what responsibilities they have? Another thing is marital misconceptions. Because, of course, the immigrant communities came to this country, and sometimes you see in the media cases of honor killings. That someone, he doesn't want his daughter to get married to a particular person, and then after that, he kills her. There was an example of, there was one girl, I believe by the name of Banaz Mahmoud. Have any of you heard about that story in London which happened? She was from a Kurdish family, and of course, and we don't say all communities do this, it happens in all communities sometimes. But she was married to someone, her father forced her to marry this person. She got divorced from him after that, and then she wanted to marry a guy that she chose. And obviously in Islamic law, if the woman has been married, she doesn't need father's permission. She can ask out of respect, of course. But by the Sharia, if she is not, for example, she has been married, she's been with a man, she can marry. So after that, she was killed and she was honor killed. And then some people say that, look, this is in your religion. Or colleagues I've had, they've asked me about FGM, female genital mutilation. Why do you Muslims do that? So I make it clear that there's a difference between actions of a Muslim and what Islam says. So we'll look into that as well, inshallah. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. And the fourth point is about women in Karbala and how they preserved this message of Karbala and what they did to preserve the message and the mourning rites of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Allah Azza wa Jal says in the Holy Quran in chapter 17 in verse 31 وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ خَشْيَةَ إِمْلَاقٍ نَحْنُ نَرْزُقُهُمْ وَإِيَّاكُمْ إِنَّ قَتْلَهُمْ كَانَ خِطَأً كَبِيرًا. Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, do not kill your offspring for the fear of poverty. We sustain them as well as you. Verily killing them is a capital sin. So what I say firstly when I speak to a non-Muslim is that Islam gave huquq, rights to women before they even became women. Before that little girl grew up into a woman and she became of the age of taklif, Islam already gave rights to them. Because as we know, the context behind this was what? The mushrikeen and the Arabs, they would bury their baby infants alive and bury them under the sand. And we see that sometimes it says in history a shallow grave. So a grave was ready for this woman, she's giving birth. That if this is a girl, what would happen? She'd give birth and they'd put the girl in the grave and bury her alive. So Islam came, and in a general way the verse says لا تقتلوا ولا تقتلوا أولادكم. It can mean all children, but specifically Islam came to give rights to girls before they even became women. And as we see, this happened in other societies as well, that people would feel shame when they have a daughter. Whereas Islam, we're going to speak about that. What does Islam say about having a daughter? Where some men say, oh, my lineage is not going to continue. I can't make money from my daughter. How can she work for me? So out of shame, these mushrikeen, these polytheists, they killed their daughters. And this was also practiced in other places. Because I remember one person at my work, he's an atheist who is Turkish. So he became atheist. He says, look, God doesn't need to tell people not to do this. People know that it's wrong already, burying a baby in the sand. I'm like, so why did people still do this? Why did people still do that? Why today India and China have the highest rates of female, I forgot the exact term for it in English, but basically dumping female babies, killing them? Why do people still do that? How about abortion as well these days? It's just repackaged as another name. Okay, someone doesn't literally bury the baby in the sand, but what are they doing? I have the right to have an abortion. But your actions were the cause there. Okay, in Islam it's different. If the woman's going to die and she has a pregnancy, that's another ruling. But if you've had relations with a man and you get pregnant, it's not in your hands to take away the baby's life. That is up to Allah Azza wa Jal. None of us are able to take our lives, commit suicide. It's up to Allah Azza wa Jal that He decides that. So even it happens in another form these days, where may it be through abortion or in other countries. And Islam came from the very beginning to get rid of that. So I told this atheist Turkish guy, I said, yes, some people know things are wrong, but they need a harsh reminder sometimes, Sometimes you need a deterrent for that person. He knows it's wrong, but he becomes addicted to an action. He keeps doing it. So I said, no, you need the guidance for the people. The person knows in his fitrah it's wrong. And that's why even some of the people that became Muslim at the Prophet's time, they had very bad, let's say, nightmares or memories. Because some of them they remembered burying their baby daughter. And they're thinking, why did they do that? So Allah Azza wa Jal needs to give guidance to people. And another thing is psychologically, when you feel you're being watched, you're less likely to do bad things. As we see in the society, if there's no laws, if there's no governance, if there's no speed cameras, for example, everyone will do what they want. But when you feel that you're being watched, sometimes it is a deterrent for you not to do that action. So people need laws and they need reminders. Yes, of course they knew it was wrong, but why does it still continue today where people start killing their children? So Islam, as I said, it teaches that women have rights even before they become women, and it taught them not to kill their baby daughters. What does the religion of Islam say about female babies, or when you have, for example, a baby daughter? Because in some societies it's a shame, and still now people will become upset if they have a daughter. Or even some Muslims, he's got a healthy baby, he's still saying, oh, I wish I had a son, And there's some people that they can't have kids, or they have problems having kids, yet he starts moaning that he's got a healthy baby daughter. We find that in Thawab al-A'mal by Sheikh Saduq, there's a hadith and there's actually a chapter where it says the reward of having daughters. So again, we're talking to non-Muslims here, we say Islam's given rights to them even before they become women. And it says that it's a reward for yourself to have a daughter. So Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said, daughters are hasanat. They're, for example, like good deeds, a blessing. And while sons are bounties. One will be rewarded for his good deeds and have to account for bounties received. So the Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, even after the Prophet's time, they kept this idea going that if you have a daughter is a blessing for you. Yes, of course, if you're living in a different type of country, even in the Muslim ones, sometimes it can be a test. If you have a daughter, you have to say, okay, how can I raise my daughter in a good way? How can I make sure that she doesn't get corrupt? Because as we said, society is always changing. And sometimes when these people who don't follow religion, when they can't get directly and destroy the religion, they start going from inside the religion. Let's start making modern so-called Muslims and praising you. Oh, you're mashallah, you're a modern Muslim. Sometimes you hear this phrase, you might have someone like, oh, you're a modern Muslim. I say, what do you define as modern? If you define as modern that I'm going to go to the pub with you sometimes and drink some alcohol, or I'll go clubbing, then that's not a modern Muslim. Yeah, I'm modern Muslim. I don't ride a camel, for example. I might get the bus to work or train. That would be what I say is modern, but not modern in the sense that you start compromising your religion for the sake of this. For example, we know as well with hijab. Hijab is something that is not restricted to Islam. You find nuns that wear hijab. And I spoke to some Catholics at my work. I said, when you portray Maryam, salamullahi alayha, Mary, how do you portray her? Do you portray her wearing tight jeans? Or she's wearing a long fitted, for example, non-fitted gown that covers her figure and covers her hair? They said, of course we portray her that way. So I said, if you imitate Maryam, and these are the Goans, I was talking to some of the brother, the Indian Christians, the Portuguese ones, as if you follow her, why you do not imitate her in your actions? So they have a concept of hijab. The Bible also speaks about hijab, that if a woman uncovers her head, she should shave her hair. But what do some people try to do? They said, let's start destroying hijab from inside, where the woman might wear completely clothes which are no different to, let's say, the non-Muslim woman, but they just have a scarf around their head. And then these influencers go on YouTube and they start saying like, oh, fashionable hijab, or they start doing things which are not befitting of hijab. Because hijab's not just a scarf, hijab is akhlaq as well. The same with the man. If the man is just flirting with women all the time or speaking in the wrong way, how is this hijab? You see, there's both a responsibility there. So hijab is something that we saw even in the Western society. There's one video around 100 years old, it's in England, and they were filming the footage around, about 100 years old now, they say it was. And when you saw the woman walking in the street, you would think, now these are Muslim women, you see? This is a problem with not following religion. That there was normal. And now if someone wears hijab, why are you wearing like that? Why are you dressing like, a nun or something? Yeah, you're oppressed. This is outdated, Oh, your husband controls you because men can't control their eyes. No, it's the choice of the woman. Yeah, there might be some women they're forced, let's say they have to wear niqab, but most women, they wear it as a choice. If now you see white, for example, I was in Reading the other day, it was called Sunnah Mosque, buying perfume there. And the woman, the girl that served me, she was white, blue eyes, but she was wearing hijab, and very good hijab as well. So this is a choice, but they try to make people feel that, no, if you wear hijab, oh, you're oppressed. But the most oppressive thing I would say is when they use a woman as a sexual object. They use a woman to sell cars. There's certain jobs women cannot get unless they look in a certain way. Air hostesses, for example. Even they can't be a certain height, they can't be fat, they have to be a certain way to match the standard. Why is it not based on her intellect and how smart she is, that now you're saying that no, she has to look a certain way? So we say that, again, society is constantly changing. Imam Hussain alayhi salam preserved Islam for us to implement and to guide us in our lives. And so we don't go around this type of misguidance within society. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil. So we said, firstly, Islam gave rights to women before they became women. Islam said then having a daughter is a blessing, hasanat. But again, what does the Quran say about men and women? So Allah Azza wa Jal says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, فَاسْتَجَابَ لَهُمْ رَبُّهُمْ أَنِّي لَا أُضِيءُ عَمَلَ عَامِلٍ مِّنْكُمْ مِنْ ذَكَرٍ أَوْ أُنْثَى بَعْضُكُمْ مِنْ بَعْضٍ. I shall never waste the deeds of any doer among you, whether it is a man or a woman. ذَكَرٍ أَوْ أُنْثَى. So Allah Azza wa Jal here is saying that, look, if you have deeds as a man or a woman, you will both get rewarded for that. It doesn't mean the man is higher, for example, because he's a man, he's over the woman. No, it mentions about deeds for men and women. Another verse says that وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِنَ الصَّالِحَاتِ مِنْ ذَكَرٍ أَوْ أُنْثَى وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ فَأُولَٰئِكَ يَدْخُلُونَ الْجَنَّةَ وَلَا يُظْلَمُونَ نَقِيرًا. So this verse says, and whoever does deeds of righteousness, be it male or female, and he is a believer, then those will enter the garden and will not be done an injustice. So we see Allah Azza wa Jal here again says, وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِنَ الصَّالِحَاتِ. Whoever does righteous deeds, whether male or female, they will enter the garden and they will not grieve. So Allah Azza wa Jal clearly in the Holy Quran, He shows some equality here between men and women when it comes to fairness between both of them and to reach their potential and get Jannah. But it doesn't mean men and women must be the same in everything. So one point I mentioned is people trying to penetrate the Muslim community to change things because they can't get rid of our religion completely. It keeps, increasing. So what do we see after that? A woman leading men in prayer. Have any of you seen this clip from here? And then there's men and women mixed, and they're like, well, men and women are equal. I'm a strong woman, I should be able to lead the salah of men. Now I think all men know why a woman should not lead salah in front of men. She can lead women in salah. It's not something to do with being sexist, discriminate, but anyone who is a man knows it's logical, it's not appropriate for that to happen. So while the Qur'an says, وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِنَ الصَّالِحَاتِ, so the one who does salihat will be rewarded from male or female, it doesn't mean we take the false notion and say everything is equal between the men and the women. And this is unfortunately some people and some of our sisters, they've got this in their minds now, that anything that applies to men needs to apply to women. And this is a feminist mindset which unfortunately it's penetrated the Muslim community that we need to be aware of. So yeah, if we see that fairness is important, then it doesn't necessarily need to be in everything. For example, we might see, let's say, a woman in Islam when it talks about the mother. Now in Islam it puts a very high emphasis on motherhood. And even there's some ahadith which says, I remind you of your mother, and your mother. Of course, وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا وَاعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. Allah says do ihsan to the parents, but there's an emphasis on how important the mother is in Islam. So should a man start coming saying now and say, oh, that's discrimination against me? Why is the hadith mentioning the mother first? No, both men and women have their particular rights and statuses. It's about fairness in Islam given to them. We're not discriminating, but it doesn't mean every single thing that we say they're equal in. Now, some of them sometimes bring the verse of chapter 4, verse 34 in the Qur'an, which is very controversial, where it says about وَضْرِبُوهُنْ. But this could be a whole lecture on this about does the Qur'an allow beating women or not. But the first part of the verse is which is discussed, where it says الرِّجَالُ قَوَّامُونَ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ بِمَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بَعْضَهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ وَبِمَا أَنْفَقُوا مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ. So this verse says men are maintainers or / have authority over women. And Allah has preferred them in this and made some of them to excel others, and because what they spend of their property. So some say that, okay, your God is saying now that men and women are not equal according to this verse. الرِّجَالُ قَوَّامُونَ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ. Men have authority on women. So how do we understand this here? What we can say is that the preference here, the qawama that's being given, is that Allah has given, meaning the responsibility of the man to maintain his family and look after them. How many men these days, let's say they don't even provide for their families. They might be sitting home not working, and then his wife has £50,000 salary. So has he really got the qawama here? It might not be applied in all cases. He should maintain and look after his family. It's wajib, but in the same case, he's not doing it. So what we can have is that this verse is conditional. If the man has the authority, it's not unjust that, okay, you just obey me and everything. It's about maintaining and looking after the family. And some men, they're lazy, they don't do that. So it wouldn't apply to all of the men in this case. And some men, they could also complain about women and say, because if a woman makes money, if a man and wife, let's say both of them work, even if she made £1 million, she doesn't need to give anything to her husband. Now, of course, if you have a loving relationship, your spouses, you're going to help each other out. You say, okay, we're both going to help out for the bills, for mortgage, whatever it is. But Islamically, she doesn't have to give 1 penny to her husband. He could have a lower salary, it's enough to maintain everything, but she's making her own money and saving it. So if anyone wanted to come, they could say, oh, you're discriminating against men now, you see that? Women can also request money for doing the chores of the house. Because a lot of people have this cultural mindset, they say, oh, cleaning and cooking is wajib on the woman. Or, some in-laws, they expect the woman to do that. Now, if a woman cleans and cooks for her husband, cleans the house, this is something she does out of respect for the husband. She does it as a favor. But some people, they expect that. She could request money for that. It's not wajib on her. Again, after that, breastfeeding the baby, the woman can request money for doing things like this. But the problem about them, some of the non-Muslims, they do not know these things, where we could twist around their logic and say, well, men in Islam could try to complain and say, oh, look, women are getting more rights than me in this sense. So the qiwama or the qawama which is mentioned in this verse is that Allah has made men maintainers of women in terms of looking after them. But again, it doesn't mean that, oh, women have no rights and they're discriminated against. Rather, Allah Azza wa Jal is giving them rights in this verse. And He is actually saying to them that they are able to, for example, take care of the house, or they can work if they want, but at the same time, all of the wajibat are on the man. Salli ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. So Allah has made this, and there was a hadith where someone comes to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the woman, and she says that, how is it the men get to do Hajj, they get to do jihad, they get to do all of like these important duties, and many of us at that time were staying at the house. So the woman asking the Prophet, she thought, okay, we're getting less reward because the men have all of these activities. And the Prophet basically said to everyone, look how eloquently she's speaking here, how she's speaking. All of what you are doing in your houses just for the sake of your husbands and family is equal to this type of jihad that all of the men are doing. So you would think getting out a sword and fighting the enemies of Islam, that's made way more in value. But the Prophet is trying to say that do not take this as something small. Because now, when some woman says she's a housewife sometimes, she gets laughed at in this society. Oh, you don't do nothing, you just stay home. But for example, when my wife looks after my son, I said, I'd rather be working that I do than looking after him, because it's a bigger job. It's a 24-hour job that women do not get paid for. So the Prophet was showing to these women and these people. I sent them. Oh, is that your water, bro? I don't want to see you. Yeah. So the Prophet is showing here, when this woman came, that do not underestimate your deeds, that what you are doing for your family and for your husband. Your actions are the same as the jihad of the Muslims against the non-Muslims who were attacking them at that time. So people shouldn't think that even if a woman chooses not to work, or she has a home business, or she wants to be a housewife, there's nothing shameful in this, and in fact it has a lot of reward according to the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam and the Prophet. So the next thing comes to forced marriage, which many people discuss, because I've had non-Muslims ask me that, why is it always that we see in some of the Asian communities that this young person, when they're like not even baligh, the parents say, oh, your son's going to marry my daughter and it's already set and it's promised, It might not happen as much now, but all of us have heard about these cases. Or some people say that this person cannot marry, not from my village. Or this person is another race, he's from another country, the marriage shouldn't happen. Or even I've met some Iraqis. One person, I remember one sister said to me, my parents said I cannot marry anyone from Najaf because we're high class in Najaf, everyone knows us. So even between people of the same race, or they have ashira type of trees, they don't marry each other. So obviously Islam came to abolish this kind of thing, and I say that no, this is culture here. A lot of us say that, oh no, we're not racist, we have no racism in our hearts, because as the Prophet said, if you have a mustard seed weight of racism, you will not enter Jannah. But then when it comes to being tested sometimes, let's say someone has a daughter and a mu'min, he's got a good job, he's a mu'min, but he's a brother who's from Africa. Would you accept him for your daughter or not? And there's nothing bad you can find about him. Just because of the case, oh, he's not necessarily from my culture. So there's no problem you can marry him with your culture. If you just have a preference, if a sister has a preference, I want to marry, let's say, an Iraqi person, I'm Iraqi or Iranian, they can do that. But to then discriminate is something that Islam doesn't accept. So I say to non-Muslims from the beginning, we don't have any racism when it comes to marriage, nor do we have something such as forced marriage. Because this is seen by them where forced marriage has happened, and they say, is this Islam then? Where the father just decides? Now what we would say about this is that no, Islam does not allow forced marriage, because the ijab and qabul, the acceptance and the offer, needs to be a mutual acceptance from both sides. A girl cannot be forced into this. Yes, there's a difference of her parents liking someone and trying to convince her. If she accepts, no problem. But the problem is that when Muslims do this, people see it, they don't distinguish between what the culture and the religion says. Because as we know, who was the first person or who gave the example to us of consulting your daughter or seeing her opinion? It was Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We see that when the Prophet Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, he came to Fatima to Zahra salamullahi alayha, he didn't just say, you're marrying Imam Ali alayhi salam, that's it. And of course he's a prophet. If any of the Imams are prophets here, if they tell us one thing, we have part to them, we obey them, we don't question that. But he still questioned her to see what she thought about this. And what did she do? She remained silent, in the sense, and they said remaining silent was a sign of an unmarried girl that she is willing to accept this. So if I see a non-Muslim and he says, oh, about forced marriage, I would say that no. According to our teachings in Islam, Rasulullah asked Fatima al-Zahra and consulted with his daughter. Although he's Rasulullah, the greatest of all creation, he doesn't need to do that. Although his word is wahi and it must be obeyed, he still went to his daughter and he consulted. So when it comes to things such as forced marriage or this where you can't marry someone who's not from my village, none of this exists in Islam. But the Muslims, we are to blame because some of us, unfortunately, we've done these things and we've perpetuated this type of non-Islamic culture where they say that, okay, this is part of Islam. No, there is no such thing as this tribal type of marriage, and there is no type of forced marriage. And what some people don't know is that, okay, what if a father is preventing the daughter? What do the ulama say about that? I knew one sister, for example, the Pakistani brothers will know here about the Sayyeda marriage, or in Arabic they say Alawiyya, isn't it, for the one who's a Sayyeda. They say Sayyeda. And there's one sister I came across, she was in her 30s, you know, her father wouldn't let her get married because he says it just needs to be a Sayyid, and there's many conditions he had. So she went in her mid-30s after that, and unfortunately the sister, she ended up taking off her hijab to try get married, you see, because she thought, okay, I'll attract more men this way, but you're not going to find a good spouse if you attract the wrong way. So in that case, some might ask, okay, so does the female have to just blindly follow the father? He's not letting her get married? You know, it's been years and he keeps rejecting every single person, even if they be good. In Islam, the ulama say that in the last resort, that if a woman would keep being prevented from her father from remarrying, then the wilayah of the father drops. And for example, she can go to, let's say, an ayatollah, marja, a mujtahid, he can become her wali amr, for example, you know, her wali, and conduct the marriage. So many non-Muslims, when I mentioned this to one of them, they were shocked about this. I said, no, it's not just the case that the girl is completely oppressed. Yes, the father should be there for the initial guidance. Because if a sister starts talking to a guy, much haram can happen. And then a lot of people say, okay, about love marriage, they say, oh, but we've fallen in love. I said, how do you get to that stage? If it's happened that you're already saying like, oh, ahibbak habibi, ahibbak, this kind of stuff, you know, hayati, all saying these words. I said, you've already crossed the line there. Real love is not what you see in these Bollywood movies or in these, what you see in society now, or even adultery, how they've actually glamorized zina in some of the TV series. That is not that. وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. That Allah has put this true love after when you find your spouse and you are tested in the hard times of marriage, you see. So if this girl, for example, she wants to marry or she's being prevented, yes, firstly she seeks the guidance of her father. If she was being prevented for unjust reasons for years and it was harming her iman, then Islam gives her the right to marry without the permission, as a very last resort in exceptional circumstances. Like the example I mentioned of the sister, she was prevented for so many years, it started affecting her iman. So this is another thing we say to non-Muslims, that a woman has a right in this case, that she can actually choose who she wants for marriage. The father should consult her, and as a last resort, if she was constantly being prevented, she can choose herself. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Another issue that comes up is about divorce, because for example in Iran there was a documentary in the courts in Iran about, you know, women seeking divorce. So they say, why is divorce not made easy in the religion of Islam, or it's something that can just happen straight away? Now firstly, we say we have narrations from the Ahlul Bayt that the thing that which is most makruh, hated, which is still halal, permissible, is divorce. It's something, of course, sometimes it happens, some people don't get on, sometimes there's abusive marriage, but yes, in some cases divorce needs to happen, but we try to prevent that, because sometimes there is reconciliation, or sometimes you have the in-laws where, you know, the in-laws start getting involved, the mother, father get involved, and it creates a big problem. That's why advice I give to people, many problems I've seen is because they get their parents involved, and it's like you and your spouse, you sort out the problems yourself. As soon as you start getting your mother involved, for example, she'll be like, he's my son, my baby. She remembers him as like 1 year old. She's always going to take the side of her son. So they should have a reconciliation themselves. But sometimes it happens where divorce it is necessary. Because I say to them, if it was made so easy that someone can just get divorced, then a woman can take like 20,000 dowry or whatever, and she said, that's it, I'm just going after that. She's taken her dowry, she's taken it, or she gets married to him, let's say for a few months, and after that she runs away. Therefore, Islam does not make divorce easy in that sense. Yes, when it comes down to it, if a woman is being truly abused, not in like that Taliban I mentioned, where they didn't let the woman, she had proof of broken bones, or it just happened out of nowhere. If real abuse happens, then a woman can get divorced without the permission of the husband. I remember one example, there was one person, a sister came to me and one sheikh, And there was one husband for her, with her. He was just with her for the money because she received a large inheritance. But he would constantly verbally abuse her. She showed evidence of this. So this sheikh, I forwarded it to him. He tried to contact the person and he started swearing at him. He wouldn't speak to him. She previously went to another centre before that. The Mu'amma Maulana said, I don't want to get involved in this. I don't. He fears the backlash that happens. Whereas people who lead the communities, they should be strong in this as community leaders. They shouldn't shy away from these issues. So after trying to speak to the person, her showing proof, him not caring, one of the Maraji in Qom, we contacted him. He gave permission and she was able to get divorced. So it's not like that woman is stuck in an abusive relationship for all of her life. Islam gives the rights for her to divorce in certain circumstances as a last resort. Let's say she needs that. It's not that she's going to be stuck in that for the rest of her life and she cannot get divorced. So this is another right that non-Muslims do not know that women have in Islam. But of course, marriage is not something that you just get married a few months and you break it off. You should try your hardest to make that marriage work. So the next point I want to discuss is about how we take women in high esteem. Because a lot of non-Muslims, they hear about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They hear about the male characters, or let's say Prophet Jesus. When this film came out, Lady of Heaven, it kind of put a focus on female Islamic characters, which are held in high esteem. So we have plenty of them which we take in high regard, like Sayyeda Zainab salamullahi alayha. How she said in the court of Yazid that you are an arrogant liar, and she said that to his face. Such strongness as a woman, which she did. And we venerate her. Maryam salamullahi alayha, the mother of Jesus, Prophet Jesus, we venerate her as well. There are many female role models that we venerate in Islam, and many of them do not know this. So if we were against women or thought women are lower, how is it that we learn our religion from women? When you look at the science of ilm al-rijal ahadith, people say, okay, it's ilm al-rijal, the science of men. There are whole books based on female narrators that preserved our ahadith and teachings for us and narrated these ahadith. So if women were lower, we wouldn't take anything from them, But what we find is that in Karbala, a lot of these women implemented the hadith of Rahimallahu man ahya amrana, where the Imam says that may Allah have mercy on the people who revive our matter, our amr. It was women who were key in this. And when we look at some of the earliest majalis which were done, it was done by who? None other than women. So they played a major role in preserving Karbala, because when we see a lot of these things in Majlis, where did they come from? Cooking food. Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, the fourth Imam, Imam Zain al-Abidin, he was someone who cooked food for Majalis. We find that the women, they had restrictions, but they still mourned. In different eras, for example, in the first era, it was so dangerous to have a Majlis at that time that people, they would have to do it within their houses and they would have to mourn quietly. Not like now where you can mourn in a very, you can cry out loud, no one will do anything to you in certain countries. But these women, when they would cry sometimes, it's said, because of the oppressive governments of that time, when they would be heard and couldn't control themselves, they would say, oh, we're crying because of a newborn died or a baby's just passed away. They had to make excuses to save their lives and do a bit of taqiyya. But even at that time, they could not withhold their tears for Abu Abdullah. So it says, in those times their mourning would be hidden and there would be silent weeping. But then people ask about the ritual of latam, that beating the chest, because people do this every year. And some people take that as the most important things for them. Obviously doing latam, it's a way of showing mourning for Imam Hussain alayhi salam. But not only your deen is latam, where you're doing the latam and after that you're not praying, you're not fasting, you're not doing any of the rituals, you're not learning your religion. It's one of the things. So where do we find some of the latam and who approved this? Or we could say in Farsi, sina zani, or chest beating. We find that some of the earliest sources which mention this practice was of the Fatimiyat, the women who engaged in such practices. One narration here, it says from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, Allahumma salli. وَقَدْ شَقَقْنَا الْجُيُوبِ وَلَطَمْنَا الْخُدُودَ الْفَاطِمِيَاتُ عَلَى الْحُسَيْنِ بْنِ عَلِي وَعَلَى مِثْلِهِ تُلْطَمُ الْخُدُودَ وَتَشَقُّ الْجُيُوبِ. So it says in this particular narration here, it says Imam Sadiq says the Fatimiyat, the women of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, they tore the seams of their outer garments, and this is in Tahdhib al-Ahkam, the book. And it says they struck their cheeks out of grief for Imam Hussain alayhi salam, and it is for the likes of him, and their cheeks, and it is for the likes of him, i.e. the Imam, that cheeks should be struck and robes should be torn. So we find that the Imams, there's three things here. There's qawl of the ma'soom, there's the amal of the ma'soom, and then there's the tacit approval. I think it's taqrir, yes. So these three actions, if the Imam says something, if we prove it's from them, it's a hujjah for us. If the Imam does something again, it's a hujjah for us, or we see that it's one of the actions they would do and it's not forbidden. The third, the tacit approval, which everyone probably knows, is that if you do an action in front of the Imam and he doesn't say anything, you can assume that this action is fine. Because the Imams were our guides and hujjah on all of the earth. If I do something wrong, the Imam has to say, don't do something like that. So some might say, why is it that Imam Hussain alayhi salam, he advised Sayyeda Zainab salamullahi alayha the night before Ashura about not, for example, wailing or hitting oneself or tearing the clothes. We say this was in a limited time frame. Where the Imam was saying this, why? He was saying it for the sake of them not preserving their dignity in front of the enemies at that time. But it didn't mean at all times after that someone cannot strike themselves out of grief for Imam Hussain alayhi salam. So this was a temporary measure which he said just because the enemies were taking the woman there. And of course, as we know, they humiliated them. There's one of the reports that say that one of the daughters, I believe, of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, she asked was it Shimr or one of the people of that time, the enemies of Imam Hussain, that can you just take the heads in another place, not around us, so people continue looking at us and give us attention. And then after that, what he did is he said, no, let's bring the heads closer to the woman so more people stare at them. So we see back then as well that the women went through a lot, but later on Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, when they wailed for Imam Hussain and cried for him and hit themselves, the Imam didn't say this was haram or this is bid'ah or you should stop doing this. So such practices, if someone tears their clothes or they hit themselves out of grief, would have reward for Imam Hussain in a secondary ruling if it's with the intention that it's for mourning of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. And there we have the silent approval of the Imam, where the Imam narrates this and he doesn't say that it is haram. So the women were very key in reviving throughout the Imam's times the Majalis of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. And that's why we say we respect women in this sense that they are the ones who brought a lot of attention towards this cause. Until this day we find many women, they continue to mourn for Imam Hussain alayhi salam, and it's also recommended for them to attend the Majalis, just like it is recommended for men. But we find that remembering Karbala is one thing, but to actually see what happened in Karbala and see the effects will be something else. There's one person who we remember that we discussed the rights of women. She did not even reach, as we can say, womanhood. She didn't reach the stage of becoming a woman, yet she had to endure so much and see what happened. Now, some people say, according to the reports I was reading last night, of course, people say that she was either 3 or 4 years old, but what we know is that she was the young daughter of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. She was just a child, and some would even say a toddler, but she was between 3 and 4 years old. Now there are different names for her. Some say Ruqayyah, some say Sukaina. Now what we have is that Sukaina was one daughter of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, around 10 years old, but some say Ruqayyah is also Sukaina. Some say her name was Fatima, but what we know according to the reports is that Imam Hussain alayhi salam had this young daughter. And what happened after that is that she had to witness Imam Hussain alayhi salam going, where she says, "O horse, do not take my father away from me." She was clinging to the leg of the horse and she said, "Do not let them make me an orphan," because she knew what would happen to the Imam. They say you don't respect women in Islam. We are commemorating and remembering someone who was between 3 and 4 years old, and then we don't have any respect for women in Islam or give them rights. It says that she saw the Imam that he would depart, and she knew that this may be the last time that she sees the Imam. But after that, she did not expect to see what she saw later on of the final outcome of Karbala. People narrate that Ruqayyah was a child during the events of Karbala and the murder of her father. It was kept hidden from her. Regarding her death history, sources say Hussein had a little daughter whom he loved dearly, and she also loved him dearly. She was among the captives of Sham and would weep day and night due to separation from her father. So she was obviously such a young age, she didn't get to spend much time with the Imam. And she was told that he had gone on a journey, but little did she know the reality. One night it says that she saw her father in a dream, and when she awoke, she was very worried for her father. She asked to see her father constantly. No one was succeeded in calming her. because of this dream she had, and the only thing that would help her is seeing the Imam in the flesh. It says that she grew more distressed, that caused all the others to be upset and weep, and hit their faces and heads, and throw soil on their heads, and wail even more. So her sadness caused the sadness of all the other women, who started not being able to control themselves, seeing that this girl, and knowing that she would be an orphan at that time. Yazid, la'natullah alayh, this accursed individual, he was awoken by the wailing of Ruqayyah. He asked what the matter was, and he was told that the small daughter of Imam Hussain alayhi salam saw her father in a sleep, and she awoke and began weeping and asking about him. When Yazid heard this, what did he do? He said, okay, he ordered for the severed head of Imam Hussain alayhi salam that was cut off, dripping in blood, to be placed before her so that she might be calm. How can one calm a 3-year-old or 4-year-old with putting the head of her father in front of her? They placed the head in a tray, covered it with a cloth, and then they put it in front of her. The young girl removed the cloth and embraced her head. And it's narrated in the history books that she said, "O Father, who has dyed you with your blood," because of the extent of blood that was on the beard, the pure beard of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, Rasulullah used to kiss. "O Father, who has cut your throat? O Father, who has orphaned me in childhood? O Father, whom will this orphan have when she grows up? O Father, whom do the women with the uncovered faces have?" And this is in a reference to the hijab which was violated of the women in Karbala, the captives of Sham. Exactly how the hijab was violated we do not know, but we do not dare mention it out of our ghira for the woman. "O Father, whom do the weeping have? O Father, who do the lost lonely have? O Father, who shall be for me in my absence? Without you, how I shall be hopeless, how I shall be lonely, O Father. I wish I was sacrificed in your place, O Father. I wish I were blind," because if anyone were to see Abu Abdullah cut up in such a way, they would wish that they lost their eyesight. "O Father, I wish I had died so that I did not have to see your blood-stained beard." She then put her lips on the oppressed martyr's lips and began weeping until she fainted. The reports say that she died at that moment, or she died a couple of days later, but either way, to see the head of Imam Hussain alayhi salam would have been too much for anyone to bear who was a true lover, especially if it would have been his daughter. So later on it says, Imam Zayn al-Abidin, he said to his aunt, "O Aunt Zainab, take the orphan away from her father's head, for she has passed away." When Zainab shook the child, this child's soul had left the body. Cries and wails, they started to arise. It's narrated the Ahlul Bayt asked some woman to perform the ghusl of the dead for the child. So there was one woman, she had to perform the ghusl, as Ayatollah Rouhani, he mentions in his book. She didn't want to do so, and they said, "Why do you not want to perform the ghusl?" They said that she had black marks, Sayyeda Ruqayyah salamullahi alayha, she had black marks on her sides. What was the reason for that? So the woman obviously took this as a sickness, that why she's got black marks, I don't want to get sick, because she has disease. Sayyida Zainab salamullahi alayha has attributed that she said, "By God, she is not sick, these are the lashes, the whips of the Kufans on the side of Sayyida Ruqayyah salamullahi alayha." Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Assalamu ala al-Hussain وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to accept this majlis for Sayyeda Ruqayyah salamullahi alayha, and for all of the martyrs of Karbala. And although we might not have in-depth details of her, we still remember her even though she was such at a young age. And we say that Islam is the religion that gives the full freedom and respect to all women, and it is us that remember these women who had a profound impact in history, or who had to go through the struggles of Karbala and had such patience. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ala alihi.